let's find some good new consequences for your children. Because let's face it, as your children grow, some of the old consequences, the way you discipline them, might need to shift and change. You know, when they have those negative words, bad attitudes, disobedience, disrespect, maybe some of the things that you used when they were little to enforce a consequence now needs to shift to something a little bit different as they grow up. And I do know it's one of the less fun jobs of being a parent. I always explain to my kids, I don't love giving you consequences either. It's not something I find joy in, but it is something we're called to do as obedient Christian parents. To find something that is painful for them. I don't necessarily mean physically painful, but something that causes them discomfort, something they don't like. Because we know that when you have a painful consequence, it gets you to think, I don't know if I want to do that next time. So we want to help them to make better choices to honor the Lord when it comes to that. So what are some possible consequences that you might need to enforce this week? Number one, probably comes to your mind, loss of privilege. Finding something that they love and removing it from their lives. Dessert, movie night with the fam, screen time, a phone time, a game time, Legos, whatever it is that they like, a privilege that they get to enjoy, now they do not get to have it anymore. And I do want to caution you to including church and church activities in removing that privilege, because I do think it's super important to have our kids at church, being taught the word, being in fellowship with others, learning from their spiritual leaders. So we don't have church as a loss of privilege. Number two, adding a chore. Yes, I love this, right? Because it benefits me and the whole family, right? How can they serve your family? Can they fold laundry, clean the bathroom, make dinner for you? Can they clean up the backyard? Can they rub down all the baseboards in your house? Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? Number three, what about having them write an essay or paragraph in response to what they did? Something we recently have done with one of our children. We saw a developing problem kept occurring in their life. We had them sit down and write a couple different paragraph responses to questions that we had asked. And then we talked about their responses. This was so good because they had to think through the why. They had to think through what the consequence of their behavior was to the family. We even had them include Bible verses as support. So depending on their age, that could be a great consequence for them. A written out response to what they did and why they shouldn't do it. Ooh, so good. Number four, time with mom. Serving with mom is what we call it. And a friend of mine just shared this with me. She has her kids just join her for whatever she's doing until their hearts are softened and they can talk about it, or until an allotted time period is up, an hour, 2 hours, half an hour, whatever it might be. So whatever you're doing, mom, now that kid is your shadow. They're helping you out. If you're making dinner, they're right there. If you're paying bills, they're sitting with you. And you can teach them this is how you have to pay bills. You've basically got a shadow with you, serving the family, seeing what you do. And remember, in all of these things, each child is so different. I'm sure you know that if you have multiples. What might be painful or feel like a consequence to one might not feel like a consequence to a different child. I remember once sending one of my children up for quiet time in her room, and she was like skipping up there. She grabbed a book, she relaxed, none of the other kids are around. I'm thinking, that is not a good consequence if she's willingly, joyfully even going to have that consequence. Let me just end with this and remind you that the writer of Hebrews gives us some wisdom when it comes to providing consequence, to providing discipline for our children, as a reminder to us that this is what God does in our lives. I would suggest studying this passage if you can. Hebrews 12, I'm going to focus on 10 and 11. For they disciplined us for a short time, speaking of parents, as it seemed best to them. But he, speaking of God, disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. Verse 11, for the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. There's painful consequences meant to lead us to this peaceful fruit of righteousness. When we are training our children in the way they should go, when we are seeking to instruct our kids and to provide discipline and consequences when necessary, we will train them by our work and our consequences, and we will encourage them to do what is good and is pleasing to the Lord.